Morning, Trainiacs. One of the new podcast sponsors that we've got is Solestar. And these are the carbon fiber insoles that I've been talking about a little bit, that even during my off season, I had put in the highest 5-second average power that I have all of 2018. So what we're gonna do today is we are just gonna do a little bit of a bike test comparing the Solestar black carbon fiber insoles, which are super stiff, ideally to transfer a lot of power into the pedals, to some of the more high-end, like structured insoles that you'd get at a bike shop, compared to the standard insoles that would come in a shoe. Let's do it. So here's how we're going to do this test. Now, full disclaimer, I realize that this is totally unscientific, but I think it might give you at least an idea of how these things perform. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm going to start with a 30-minute warm-up. And why 30 minutes? It's because at around 30 minutes, your heart starts going into cardiac drift. That's where towards the end of a workout, even at the same pace and effort, your heart rate is higher just by the accumulated increases in your heart rate. What I'm going to do then is at 30 minutes, I'm going to switch into the standard road shoe, very floppy insoles that come in every single road shoe. I am going to do a 1 minute max effort build, where over the course of 1 minute, I'm going to build up to a 10-second sprint to see the top end power with these insoles. I'm then gonna do 9 minutes, keeping my heart rate at a steady 115 beats a minute. This is very recovery, and we're going to see what the average power is over that 9-minute period. That's my zone 2, so hopefully over the course of the workout, I'm not gonna be really building any fatigue. Then, at 40 minutes into the workout, I'm going to switch to these more structured insoles that you might get after a bike fit that end up positioning your foot a little bit more stable, but still is fairly flexy. I'm gonna repeat that same routine, going 1 minute, building to a 10-second sprint, and then 9 minutes, but I'm going to knock the heart rate down to around 113 to account for that cardiac drift. Then at 50 minutes into the workout, I'm going to switch to the Solestar insoles, which you can see are made of carbon fiber on the bottom, completely stiff, and I've found end up transferring more power into the pedals. But I'm going to do that same routine, 1 minute, build to sprint for 10 seconds, 9 minutes at 111 to account for cardiac drift. And theoretically, because I'm doing this at the end of the workout and the heart rate is lower, I should, in theory, actually be making it harder on the Solestar insole. Now, I'm also gonna do all of this with just nasal breathing so that I'm not changing the amount of carbon dioxide and oxygen uptake in my lungs over the course of the workout, thus skewing what my heart rate number is going to be at. So we're gonna try to level out that heart rate as much as we can, slightly accounting for cardiac drift. And then after, we'll compare some of the rides that I've actually done in the real world with these Solestar insoles over the last few months to the mid-range, slightly structured insoles that I've used for the rest of the year. All right, let's go about this. tremendously unscientific, but we might be able to pull something out. Yep, Trainiacs, we got some good info to look at. It worked. So, I had to make just a couple of changes to that test because I wanted to give a more stable representation of the power. So what I did was, instead of 9 minutes at a low intensity, I finished that high intensity, gave myself 2 minutes to bring my heart rate somewhat down, and then did 5 minutes. So that then allowed me 2 minutes to do a U-turn so that I could come back on the same course, level out the data. Here it is. Here it is. Pete, you're like a data scientist. You're gonna know all about power profiles. I'm so excited to know about power profiles, Dad. I know. So this is the workout here. And what I wanna first look at is the peak power profile, because that's less susceptible to changes in heart rate and cadence. So we'll take a look at the first effort, zoom in here over on the right. You can see that the max power with the basic entry level insoles is 788 watts. Take note of that. Then we go on to the second test, which was the $50 specialized insoles that are meant to stabilize your foot a little bit more. Zoom in there on the right, and is actually 750 watts less. My guess, I was starting to get a little bit tired, which is normal of these peak efforts. But let's see what happened with the third test with the Solestar insoles. You zoom in there on the right, the peak power is 859 watts, and that's what I've consistently found time after time with these, that at the same efforts, I'm probably getting about 10% higher peak power, which then translates down to better power at lower intensities. I'm gonna show you how the year of peak power ended up going. This here is my max 5-second average power over the course of 2018. And you can see that over the winter, in January, February, March, I was doing some average power. The second and third best average power was in February. But at this time, I was starting to build a lot of fitness. I was actually doing really specific training for peak power. Then, all of a sudden, race season comes in, and the peak power is a fair bit lower. Even though I was still at this point pretty fit, and I was doing once a week the group rides that got crazy intense. But, so right here ends up putting us into September after Half Ironman Worlds, and I go into an off season. And at this point, I was not training specifically for anything whatsoever. Only thing I did was I changed over to these insoles. I was actually on the road bike, which I hadn't really been on much because I'd been doing so much time trial specific riding for so long, that I was on a new position with new insoles, and once I adapted to them, you can see that the power profile increases, and the peak 5-second power that I put out over all of 2018 was in the dead of the off season, after Kona, when theoretically I'm not very fit, with a back injury. If there is a time for me to not be able to do peak power, this was it. Managed to crank it out. Combine that with the fact that on the last theoretically tiredest peak power interval that we just did, I put out, calculations, Canadian math, 9% more power than when I was purely fresh. That shows something. I want to show you what happened with that steady effort. So this is what I think got a fair bit skewed and we were going to have some trouble with. Steady effort with the standard comes with the shoe insole at 117 beats per minute average. I averaged 115 watts. Then I did the slightly supportive $40, $50 stability insole, and I averaged 114 beats a minute, just 97 watts. I had a hard time bringing my heart rate down. that makes sense. So you would then think that with the Solestar insole, I would then have even less power because my heart rate has cardiac drifted up. Go to that 5-minute section, and with average 114 beats a minute, I was able to average 105 watts. So with the Solestar insoles, I was still able to put out more watts than I did with this, even though theoretically I should have a harder time keeping my heart rate lower at the same watts. Is this official that the Solestar insoles are like guaranteed to increase your power? No, definitely not. This is not a scientific study whatsoever. I'd just say that anecdotally. I find that it is much easier to put out those really high efforts. In addition to that, I have put out the highest FTP that I ever have. In addition to that, athletes like those on Team Sky, which is notorious in the road cycling world for looking at incremental, tiny average changes that they can make that might be a little bit better, that is going to result in better performance. They are sponsored by Solestar insoles. And if we talk about a helmet costing $300 to save a little bit of watts, we talk about wheels costing $3,000 to $4,000 to save a little bit of watts. When we talk about this costing just $100 to maybe add 1-2% on your wattage at the same effort, that's a pretty good dollar per speed investment. So now if you want to get yourself a pair of these, because they are a podcast sponsor, they have set up a discount of 10% that you can get by going to solestar.de and using the coupon code Triathlon10. I don't make any money off of you going there. That's not an affiliate link or an affiliate code. They sponsor the podcast, they send these out, and everyone that I talk to is like, what is the best investment that I can make? Oh, furnace, bad timing. What is the best investment I can make that doesn't cost a lot? You can give these a try. Triathlon10 at solestar.de to get yourself 10% off and give them a shot. All right, later, Trainiacs.